Hi all, and welcome back to Let's Play Astro Boy Omega Factor. Having just been awakened from a long sleep and taught the basics of combat, it's now time to go and save Watto, a girl we met for all of 5 seconds. In keeping with the episodic nature of its roots, each chapter in Astro Boy Omega Factor is mostly self-contained and starts with a charming little intro sequence. Also charming is this long fall into Metro City. It's a genius way to start the game and gives a good sense of the scale and activity of the place, without actually making you play through it all yourself. They're also immediately introducing us to the treasuriness of the game. We've already seen the bright and vibrant visuals and heard the great soundtrack, but they're going to lay some self-referential placards on us as well. It's very nostalgic and reminiscent of old Gunstar Gum and Sega billboards dotting the skyline. Design-wise, a lot of the enemies aren't really all that varied, but they do differentiate themselves with color schemes and attack types. For example, the blue ones here just shoot at you, whereas the green ones are more content to lob bombs in an arcing pattern at you. And pink ones instead choose to fire semi-homing missiles at Astro. You're always going to want to try to remember what type you're dealing with, otherwise one of those missiles might creep up behind you and bite you in the butt. Sega billboard there too. A lot of them are really fun, even if some of them are a little obtuse, like Tuna we'll be seeing. Of note is the red enemy here. See, you saw the white one when flying, but the red one didn't. That's because some enemies are resistant to knockback, and those are the ones you're going to want to watch out for. Because enemies that slowly come up towards you without actually flinching to your attacks are really dangerous in this game. Gunstar Billboard is an obvious reference to the classic Genesis game Gunstar Heroes. It actually got a sequel in 2005 for the GBA called Gunstar Superheroes. Very good series. These turret types of enemies are also immune to knockback, but they're also rooted in place, so they're not nearly as dangerous as the red enemies. Hearts here are a primary means of replenishing health, and whenever you pick them up, they'll restore a sizable chunk of them, as well as restoring your EX gauge. They don't show up all that often, but when they do, it's always wise to pick it up. Signpost enemy here is kind of odd. It's pretty obviously meant to teach you how to dodge enemy attacks, but I'm not going to have any of that. What I am going to have is this. In a couple places in the environment, they actually hide people. And obviously, since they power you up, it's always nice to find these guys. So busting up the environment a little whenever you can is always a good idea. Number 26, Alejo. He is a kid who is very knowledgeable about Metro City. He may hold a clue to solving the mysteries of this game. This character is thought to be a representation of Osamu Tezuka himself. In the manga Captain Atom, Astro actually plays a side character, while Alejo plays one of the main characters. There's even a scene where a battle between Astro and Alejo takes place. In the original manga, Alejo's known as Tamao, and he's part of a grouping of school friends that often hang around Astro. He's a robot, so he doesn't necessarily have to, but O'Shea puts Astro into school, so he can learn more about humans and the world in general. Alejo generally plays the role of nerdy kid, being smart but also being kind of small and wimpy and gets beat up by bullies a lot, which means that Astro usually steps in to help protect him. Apparently Osamu Tezuka had a bit of a troubled school life himself, so I can buy the whole inspiration thing. Upgrading your jets allows you to jet twice in a row, which is very useful for getting around enemies more easily. Once you've fully upgraded it, you can zip around like a super-powered Hornet and really pester your foes. Speaking of Hornets, we've seen this enemies like before, but they're looking a little smaller than they were before. Wonder what's up with that. I'm also wondering what's up with the sign in the background. I don't know if Guy states it's a reference to anything, but the name of this area is World Federal Building, so it might have something to do with that. The building it's in front of is presumably the World Federal Building, seeing how distinctive it is. Also distinctive are these bees. Yeah, this is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum than before. Astro Boy Omega Factor has the whole color switching thing for enemies, but it also has an interesting little spray upscaling trick. Enemies that are upscaled in this manner get much more powerful, and you're definitely going to want to watch out for them. In turn, these smaller enemies generally get less powerful, but they're also harder to hit. For example, getting hit by one of those things will generally do maybe twice as much damage as one of their smaller versions would. It's really quite dangerous and something you're going to want to watch out for. This particular building is called the Warehouse Battle, and it's very good for practicing your kicking skills. Now, normally if you were trying to get a decent score, you'd be killing all these people, but the jet is also useful for bypassing all sorts of enemies. Like so. Also notable there is the amount of damage they did. It's partly because of how big they were, and partly because of hard mode. This game really does not joke around when it goes into hard mode. These spider enemies aren't too tough, and really the only reason they're in is because they showed up for about 10 seconds as security spiders in the first episode of the Astro Boy's 2003 anime. Metro City is a pretty iconic Astro Boy location, but this particular version has a whole bunch of enemies that were rather conspicuously taken from said first episode. I've always kind of figured that Treasure used this opportunity to just get all of the requisite advertising out of the way. This big version of the spider is our first boss, and it really doesn't have all that much going for it. Its moves are the same as the smaller version. It shoots large bombs out of its spinneret and also is capable of firing small silvery silk bullets out of its mouth. Its health is represented by a series of balls down at the bottom of the screen, but as you see there, it doesn't take too much to take it out. And our reward is Watto, who was apparently just kind of chilling in the spider's lair until we showed up. Number 2, Watto Chiyoko. She is a very cheerful girl who is full of energy. Dr. O'Shea put her in charge of educating Astro, but she was kidnapped by robots. She always carries bandages with her just in case someone gets hurt. She plays a female lead character in the anime, the Three-Eyed One. Her unusual name is derived from Dr. Watson of Sherlock Holmes. Watto Chiyoko is the first of many characters within the game that don't really belong in an Astro Boy work, instead being taken from another Tetsuka work, in her case the Three-Eyed One. She plays a supporting role to the work's protagonist, one Shiraku Hosuke, who's constantly getting beaten up by bullies and saved by Watto. She's really strong and really doesn't fit within the role she was given in the game, because she'd be far more likely to be beating those robots up herself than being hauled off like a sack of meat. Earlier, Astro expressed surprise at the fact that we're getting multiple bosses, but he really shouldn't have been surprised at all because having many bosses in a single stage is kind of a Treasure hallmark. Indeed, this game does feature a whole bunch of bosses, with this particular one being, like many of the enemies in this stage, a reference to the first episode of the 2003 anime. Magnemite's the core component of a power station, and unfortunately it managed to get itself overloaded when all the power in Metro City was diverted to the Ministry of Science, to assist in the reviving of Astro. Now, in the anime, he was put down by letting him discharge all his energy into Astro's body, but here it takes a bit more of a direct approach. He only has 2 attacks, shooting a big laser at you when you're in front of him and trying to swat you off his back. But he is really brutal, doing a ton of damage if he actually does connect, and using this desperation attack when you get him down to 1/4 health. It's really hard to put the finishing touches on him, and it gives a good idea of how difficult some of the bosses in this game are. In hard mode, this particular press attack will basically one-hit KO you at this point in the game. It's not exactly easy to deal with. Sprites are really well animated in this game though, the bosses are especially really fun to look at. When you finish the stage, you get your score boosted with things like your remaining life and the amount of EX skill power you still have, but again, it's not really all that important. Mysterious silhouetted men in trench coats are always fun, but unfortunately he's gonna have to wait. I'll be seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.